Dad's silent revenge.
The night I found out I wasn't invited to my own daughter's rehearsal dinner, I was standing in my kitchen in Portland, Oregon, folding the check I'd just written for $58,000. The final payment for Carol's dream wedding. I'd already covered the venue, the catering, the photographer, the flowers, the band. Everything Shed circled in those glossy bridal magazines Shed been collecting since she was 12. My name is Leonard Price. I'm 61 years old, and I've been a mechanical engineer at Boeing for 38 years until I took early retirement 6 months ago. My late wife Sharon would have loved to see this day. I was doing it for both of us. I called Carol to confirm the deposit went through. "Hey, sweetheart," I said when she picked up, "just letting you know the Riverside Gardens payment went through. You're all set for Saturday." There was a pause, music in the background, laughter, the clink of glasses. "Oh, Dad, thanks." Her voice sounded distant, distracted. "That's great. So what time do you want me there Friday?" I asked. "For the rehearsal dinner? I was thinking I could come early, help set up if you need anything." Another pause, longer this time, then a different voice cut in. "Timothy, my soon-to-be son-in-law." Smooth, practiced, like head rehearsed this. "Hey, Leonard, actually the rehearsal dinner is just for the wedding party and immediate family. You know, keeping it intimate, small, and meaningful." I switched the phone to my other ear. "Immediate family. I'm her father, Timothy. I am immediate family," I said slowly. Right, he said, his tone shifting to that patient voice people use when they think you're not understanding something obvious. "But it's really just the people in the ceremony. Carol's bridesmaids, my groomsmen, our parents who are walking us down the aisle. You get it? Our parents who are walking us down the aisle, but I was walking her down the aisle, I was the one giving her away." In walking Carol down the aisle, I said, my voice quiet. "Actually," Timothy said, and I could hear Carol whispering something in the background. "We decided my dad and her Uncle Paul will do it together. You know, since Sharon isn't here, it feels more balanced that way." The words hit me like a fist to the sternum. Uncle Paul, my brother, who lived in Seattle and saw Carol maybe twice a year. He was walking my daughter down the aisle. "Not me." "Carol," I said, my throat tight. "Is that true?" She came back on the line, her voice small. "Dad, it's just Timothy's family is really traditional, and they thought it would be nice if I didn't hear the rest." The phone felt heavy in my hand. The kitchen, the one Sharon and I had remodeled together 20 years ago, suddenly felt too small, too quiet, too full of ghosts. The granite countertops we'd picked out together, the cherry cabinets we'd saved for 2 years to afford, the breakfast nook where Carol used to do her homework while Sharon cooked dinner. It all felt like a museum to a life that had slipped away without me noticing. "Dad," Carol said. "Are you still there?" "Yeah," I managed. "I'm here. You understand, right? It's not personal. It's just, this is our day and we want it to be perfect. Our day, the day I'd been saving for since she was born. The day I'd de-liquidated part of my Boeing retirement fund to pay for. The day I'd sold Sharon's vintage Mercedes, the one Shed driven to work at the hospital for 15 years, to cover the last-minute upgrades Carol insisted on. "Sure," I said. "I understand. Great, so we'll see you Saturday at the ceremony, 200 sharp. Love you, Dad." The line went dead before I could answer. I stood in my kitchen holding a silent phone that suddenly weighed 1,000 pounds. Outside, the streetlights flickered on over the driveway where I used to teach Carol to ride her bike, where Sharon and I had waved goodbye on her first day of kindergarten, where I'd helped her load up for college 12 years ago, promising I'd always be there for her. Always. I looked at the checkbook still open on the counter. $58,000, that number stared back at me like an accusation. It wasn't the biggest check I'd written for Carol. Not even close. There was the $15,000 for the down payment on her condo when she and Timothy first moved in together. The $8,000 ID quietly transferred when their credit cards maxed out during the holidays. The $7,000 for Timothy's business venture that never quite got off the ground. And dozens of smaller amounts, minus $500 here, $300 there, always for some emergency that couldn't wait. I'd kept telling myself it was what fathers do. You help, you support, you make sure your child has opportunities you didn't have. After 38 years of getting up at 5:30 a.m., putting on steel-toed boots, and walking into that Boeing plant, it'd earned the right to make my daughter's life easier. But this, being replaced by Uncle Paul, being excluded from the rehearsal dinner, like I was some distant cousin who might embarrass them, this was different. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in Sharon's old reading chair, the one with the needlepoint cushion Shed made during her chemotherapy treatments, and stared at our wedding photo on the mantle. We'd gotten married at City Hall with 2 witnesses and $20 between us. No catering, no band, no Riverside Gardens, just love and a promise. And We'd kept that promise through my engineering salary and her nursing shifts, through the miscarriage before Carol, through my mother's long illness, through Carol's college years and Sharon's cancer. But somewhere along the way, Id made a different kind of promise to Carol, an unspoken one, that I would always say yes, always write the check, always be the safety net. And Shed learned to count on it the way you count on gravity. The morning after the phone call, I woke up early. For years, that was Sharon's habit, not mine. She used to say, the quiet before the world wakes up is when you hear yourself think clearly. ID never understood that until I found myself at my kitchen table at 6:15, staring at my bank statements spread across the surface like evidence of a crime I didn't remember committing. I'd been tracking my finances carefully since Sharon passed 3 years ago. When you're living on early retirement and Boeing pension, you have to. But as I looked at the numbers now, really looked at them, I saw something I'd been too guilty to admit before. In the 3 years since Carol met Timothy, I'd given them $82,000. I wrote it down on a piece of paper, like seeing it in my own handwriting might make it less real. $82,000 was more than I'd earned in 2 years of engineering work. It was the down payment on the house Sharon and I had saved 5 years to afford. It was Carol's entire college fund. The one Wed started when she was born, carefully depositing $50 every month for 18 years. And for what? So I could be excluded from her wedding party like some embarrassing relative they were ashamed of. I picked up my phone. There were 3 text messages from Carol, all sent after midnight. Dad, you're not mad, right? Timothy's family is just really particular about these things. Love you. Can't wait for you to see me walk down the aisle. Everything's going to be perfect on Saturday. Walked down the aisle with Uncle Paul and Timothy's father, while I sat in a pew like any other guest. Everything perfect except for the man who'd paid for it all. That's when I knew something inside me had broken. Not in a loud, dramatic way, but quietly, finally, like an old rope that's been fraying for years and has reached its last thread. I opened my laptop and logged into my bank account, the joint checking account I'd set up years ago. The one that was supposed to be for emergencies, the one Carol had access to for when she really needed help. The balance was $3,247. It should have been closer to $20,000. I clicked on the transaction history. $500 withdrawal, emergency car repair, $1,200 withdrawal medical bill, $2,100 withdrawal, surprise tax payment, all within the last month, all while I was writing checks for wedding costs. All without a phone call to ask, just the automatic assumption that my money was her money. I closed my eyes and let the truth wash over me like cold water. She wasn't just taking my money. She was taking it while actively excluding me from her life. I was good enough to fund the party, but not important enough to attend it. I picked up the phone and called my bank. First National, this is Kevin. How can I help you? Hi, Kevin. This is Leonard Price. I need to remove someone from my joint checking account. There was a pause, the sound of typing. All right, Mr. Price, let me pull up your account. Can I ask who you're removing, my daughter? The words came out easier than I'd expected. Maybe because they felt like the first honest thing I'd said in months. I spent the rest of that morning making calls. The bank, my investment advisor, my credit card companies, every account where Carol had access, every automatic transfer ID set up to make her life easier. I closed them all. With each call, I felt a little lighter, like I was shedding weights I'd been carrying for so long I'd forgotten they weren't part of me. When I finished, my hands were steady for the first time in hours. The house felt different too. Not empty, but mine again. That afternoon, I drove to a coffee shop across town, one where I knew I wouldn't run into anyone I knew, and ordered a black coffee I didn't really want. I just needed to be somewhere that wasn't my house, somewhere that didn't echo with Sharon's absence and Carol's betrayal. I was halfway through the coffee when my phone rang. Carol, I stared at the screen, watching it vibrate against the table. Part of me wanted to ignore it, but old habits die hard.
Hello, Dad?
Her voice was tight, angry. What did you do? I took a sip of coffee, surprised at how calm I felt. What do you mean the bank called me? They said you removed me from your accounts, all of them. That's right, why would you do that? She wasn't asking. She was demanding, like a child who'd been told she couldn't have ice cream for dinner. Because not a bank, Carol. Your father. I don't understand what that's supposed to mean. I set the coffee down carefully, watching the steam rise from the surface. It means done being treated like an ATM with a heartbeat. That's not fair, she said, her voice rising. People at nearby tables glanced over. We needed that money. Timothy's business is just getting started and we have expenses. We're trying to build a life together. So do I, and I already built my life, Carol. I worked 38 years at Boeing, saved every penny I could, took care of your mother through cancer, put you through college debt-free, and helped you get started as an adult. I've done my job, you're retired. What expenses do you have? I laughed, a bitter sound that surprised even me. I'm 61, Carol, not dead. I have a mortgage, utilities, medical bills, car insurance. I have a life that doesn't revolve around funding yours. You have plenty of money, she shot back. You're just being petty because of the rehearsal dinner thing? Petty? The word landed like a slap. The rehearsal dinner thing? I repeated slowly. You mean the part where you replaced me with Uncle Paul, where you decided I wasn't important enough to be part of your wedding party after I paid $58,000 for it. It's not about importance. It's about tradition. Timothy's family, I paid $58,000 for your wedding, Carol. $58,000, that's not tradition. That's a down payment on a house. That's a new car. That's 2 years of my pension. Silence on the other end. I could hear her breathing, probably realizing for the first time that her words had consequences. And you know what? I continued, my voice steady. I was happy to do it. I wanted to do it because you're my daughter and I love you, but in not paying for the privilege of being treated like I don't matter. Dad, you're overreacting. No, I said, am finally reacting appropriately. What's that supposed to mean? It means the bank is closed, Carol, permanently. I could hear her breathing, fast and shallow. You can't do this. Not now. The wedding is in 2 weeks. The wedding is paid for, I said. Every penny. You'll have your perfect day. We need money for the honeymoon, she said. Her voice shifting softer now, pleading, we were counting on you to help with that. You always said you'd help us get started. I've given you $82,000 in 3 years, Carol. You're started, 82. She sounded genuinely shocked. That can't be right, it's right. I have the records, every check, every transfer, every time you called with an emergency that couldn't wait. Another long silence. When she spoke again, her voice was different. Cold. Dad, she said, finally, if you cut us off, you're gonna regret this. Something in her tone made my blood run cold. It wasn't anger anymore, it was something else, something calculated like Timothy whispering in her ear. Is that a threat? It's a fact, she said. We'll handle this our way. The line went dead. I sat in that coffee shop for another hour, staring at my phone, waiting for the fear to come, but it didn't. Instead, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Relief. 3 days passed. Quiet days. I worked in the garden Sharon had loved, fixing the loose board on the back deck, organizing the garage, small normal things that made me feel like I was reclaiming pieces of my life. The roses were blooming, the ones Sharon had planted the year before she got sick. Pink ones by the kitchen window, white ones along the fence. ID kept them alive through pure stubbornness, not wanting to let another part of her disappear. Then on Thursday morning, the doorbell rang. I opened it to find a man in his 40s, expensive suit, leather briefcase, the kind of polished smile that doesn't reach the eyes. Leonard Price? Yes. He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a manila envelope. You've been served. My stomach dropped. Served with what? A lawsuit. Your daughter and her fiancé are suing you for breach of oral contract and promissory estoppel. They're seeking reimbursement for financial commitments you allegedly promised but failed to deliver. He handed me the envelope and walked away, leaving me standing in my doorway holding the thing like it was contaminated. A lawsuit, my own daughter was suing me. I went inside, closed the door, locked it, and sat at the kitchen table. My hands shook as I opened the envelope. Complaint for breach of contract. Plaintiffs Carol Price and Timothy Hayes. Defendant Leonard Price. I scanned the pages, my vision blurring. The defendant made repeated verbal promises to provide financial support for the plaintiff's wedding and honeymoon. The plaintiffs relied on these promises in good faith, making commitments they cannot now fulfill. The defendant willfully and maliciously withdrew promised support. Amount sought $25,000 for honeymoon expenses, emotional distress, and breach of trust. I read it 3 times before the words started to make sense. They weren't just asking for honeymoon money. They were asking for damages. They were asking for emotional distress, for the crime of stopping them from draining me dry. My phone rang. Unknown number. I answered anyway. Mr. Price, this is Joyce Thompson, attorney at law. Am calling because a colleague mentioned your situation. Do you have legal representation? How did you know about this? Small legal community, she said, and cases like yours are more common than you'd think. May I ask, have you been served yet 20 minutes ago, and you're alone? I looked around my empty kitchen. The wedding photo magnets on the refrigerator, Carol's college graduation picture on the counter. The family vacation shots from when she was still young enough to think her old man was a hero. Yes. Would you be willing to meet with me this afternoon? No charge for the consultation. 2 hours later, I was sitting across from Joyce Thompson in her downtown office. She was maybe 50 sharp eyes behind frameless glasses and the kind of calm presence that made you feel like things might actually be okay. Her office was on the 15th floor of a building downtown with windows that looked out over the Willamette River. Professional but not intimidating. She read through the complaint, making notes, her expression unchanging, while she said finally, setting the papers down. This is textbook financial elder abuse disguised as a contract dispute. Elder abuse, I repeated, M61. You're over 55, you're a widower, and you have adult children making financial demands under threat of legal action. That's elder abuse. She leaned forward. Tell me everything, start from the beginning. So I did. The wedding costs, the years of support, the joint accounts, the rehearsal dinner, the exclusion, the threat, all of it. She listened without interrupting, taking notes in precise handwriting. When I finished, she sat back. Mr. Price, do you have documentation? Everything? I keep detailed records for the first time, she smiled. Good, because we're not just going to defend this lawsuit, we're going to destroy it. She pulled out a legal pad. Here's what's going to happen. They're claiming you made promises, but a promise to give a gift, even a specific amount, isn't legally enforceable unless it's in writing. And even if it were, you've already given them tens of thousands of dollars. Any reasonable person would say you've more than fulfilled any moral obligation. But they're saying emotional distress. They're saying that because they're desperate, Joyce said. People who file suits like this are usually in financial trouble and see a parent as an easy target. They expect you to fold because you love your daughter and don't want the embarrassment of a lawsuit. I'm not folding. I can see that. She made another note. Well, file a response denying all claims, then counterclaim for harassment and abuse of process. And if they really want to push this, demand they repay every penny you've given them over the past 3 years. My head spun. Is that possible? If we can prove the money was given under duress or with the expectation of repayment? Yes. Did you ever tell them you expected to be paid back? No. I told them it was to help them get started. And did they promise you anything in return? I thought about it. Carol used to say, when Timothy's business takes off, we'll take care of you, Dad. You'll never have to worry. Things like that. Joyce's pen moved faster. Perfect. That's consideration that makes it potentially a loan, not a gift. She looked up. Mr. Price, I'm going to be direct with you. This is going to get ugly. Your daughter is going to say things about you in legal documents that will hurt. She may try to claim you're incompetent, that you're manipulating the situation, that you're bitter about the wedding. Are you prepared for that? I thought about the rehearsal dinner, about Uncle Paul walking my daughter down the aisle, about the $58,000 check and the casual cruelty of just immediate family. Yes, I said. Unprepared. Over the next week, Joyce and I built my case. Every bank statement going back 3 years, every text message where Carol asked for money, every email where I said yes, every withdrawal from the joint account. The paper trail was devastating. $15,000 condo down payment, $8,000 credit card bailout, the $7,000 failed business investment, $58,000 wedding costs, dozens of smaller amounts. $500 here, $1,200 for a surprise tax bill that probably didn't exist. We organized it all in a thick binder with tabs and highlights. Joyce called it our nuclear option. If they push this to court, she said, we show the judge exactly what kind of people they are. But I hoped it wouldn't come to that. Part of me still believed Carol would come to her senses, that she'd drop the lawsuit, apologize, try to rebuild what we'd broken. That hope died the following Tuesday. I was pulling weeds in the front garden when a car pulled up, Carol's silver Honda. She got out, sunglasses on despite the overcast sky, and walked toward me like she owned the sidewalk. We need to talk, she said. I stood up, brushing dirt from my knees. I have a lawyer now, Carol. You should talk to her. I'm not here about the lawsuit, she crossed her arms. I'm here about the wedding. My chest tightened. What about it? She took off her sunglasses, and I saw her eyes were red, but I couldn't tell if it was from crying or anger. Timothy and I have been talking, she said. And we've decided maybe it's better if you don't come. The world tilted. Don't come to your wedding. It's going to be awkward now with everything that's happening. The lawsuit, you cutting us off, making this whole thing about money. We don't want that energy on our special day, making it about money. I repeated, my voice quiet. Carol, you're the one suing me for $25,000 because you promised. She snapped. You've always promised to be there for me. And now when we actually need you, you're being selfish. There was that word again. After 38 years of getting up before dawn, after putting her through college, after giving her $82,000, I was selfish for wanting to be treated with basic respect. I've given you nearly everything I have, I said. And we're grateful, she said. But her tone suggested otherwise, but that doesn't mean you get to control our lives. This is our wedding, our day, our decision. I paid for it. So what? You think that buys you the right to judge us? To embarrass us by making a scene? I haven't made any scenes, Carol. I just stopped saying yes to every demand. She stepped closer. You know what? Fine. Keep your money, keep your petty little boundaries, but don't expect to be part of our lives anymore. Timothy's family warned me about this. They said you'd try to manipulate me, use money to control me. I didn't believe them, but I was wrong. Each word hit like a physical blow. I have never tried to control you, I said quietly. Then why are you doing this? Why are you ruining the happiest time of my life? Because your father, not your piggy bank. She stared at me, and for just a second I saw something flicker in her eyes. Uncertainty maybe, or recognition, but it vanished as quickly as it came. Don't come to the wedding, she said again. I'll have your name removed from the guest list. She turned and walked back to her car. I stood in my garden, dirt under my fingernails, watching my daughter drive away. The sun had broken through the clouds, casting long shadows across the lawn Sharon and I had planted together 30 years ago. And I realized something. I'd already lost her, maybe a long time ago. Maybe the moment Timothy convinced her that love could be measured in dollar signs. That night, I called Joyce. She uninvited me from the wedding. There was a pause. I'm sorry, Leonard. Don't be. I think it clarifies things. How so? Now I know exactly who I'm dealing with. Joyce's voice hardened, then let's give them the fight they asked for. 2 weeks later, we stood in a courtroom. Not a big dramatic room like in movies, just a small civil court chamber with fluorescent lights and worn carpeting. Carol and Timothy sat with their lawyer on one side. I sat with Joyce on the other. The judge was a woman in her late 50s, Judge Ruth Anderson, with reading glasses on a chain, and the demeanor of someone who'd heard every excuse ever invented. Carol's lawyer went first, young, overconfident, the kind of attorney who probably charged by the syllable. Your Honor, this is a straightforward case of promissory estoppel. Mr. Price made repeated specific promises to fund his daughter's honeymoon. The couple relied on these promises, made commitments, and are now left in financial distress due to his capricious withdrawal of support. Capricious. As if stopping someone from bleeding you dry was a whim, he presented their evidence. Text messages where it said, "Don't worry, I'll help." Emails where I'd written, "I want you to have the wedding of your dreams." Voicemails where I'd told Carol, "I've got you covered," all taken out of context, all twisted to look like binding contracts. Then Carol testified. She wore a pale blue dress, hair pulled back, minimal makeup, the picture of a wounded daughter. "My father has always been my rock," she said, her voice trembling. "After Mom died, he promised he'd take care of me, that I'd never have to worry, and I believed him." She dabbed her eyes with a tissue. "Timothy and I planned our honeymoon based on Dad's promise. We booked flights, hotels, everything. And then out of nowhere, he cut us off. Said horrible things about Timothy's business, accused us of using him." She looked directly at me. "I don't understand what happened to my father. It's like he became a different person." Judge Anderson wrote something down. Then it was our turn. Joyce stood, calm and precise. "Your Honor, the plaintiffs would have this court believe that Mr. Price is a callous father who abandoned his daughter." Nothing could be further from the truth. She opened our binder. "Over the past 3 years, Mr. Price has given the plaintiffs $82,000. Not lent, given with no expectation of repayment and no written agreement." She walked Judge Anderson through the documentation. Every check, every transfer, every time ID said yes. "This is not a man who fails to support his daughter," Joyce said. "This is a man who was systematically exploited until he finally said enough." Then I testified. I told the judge about the rehearsal dinner, about being replaced by Uncle Paul, about the joint account withdrawals I never authorized, about the threat Carol made when I closed the accounts. "Your Honor," I said, "I would have given my daughter anything. I did give her everything. But the moment I stopped, she sued me. That's not a daughter seeking her father's support. That's someone who sees me as a resource to be extracted." The courtroom was quiet when I finished. Judge Anderson removed her glasses. "Let me make sure I understand," she said, looking at Carol's lawyer. "Your clients received $58,000 for a wedding, $15,000 for a condo, and multiple other payments totaling nearly $82,000 over 3 years. And now they're suing for an additional $25,000 because Mr. Price declined to fund their honeymoon." "Your Honor, the promises were made, alleged promises," the judge interrupted. "Verbal statements of support are not legally binding contracts, especially when, as Mr. Price's counsel has demonstrated, he has already provided substantial financial assistance far exceeding any reasonable expectation." She looked at Carol and Timothy. "I see this pattern frequently. Adult children who have become accustomed to parental support and view it as an entitlement rather than a gift. When that support is withdrawn, they retaliate legally." Timothy shifted in his seat. Carol stared at her hands. "This court categorically denies the plaintiff's claim." Relief flooded through me, but she wasn't finished. Furthermore, she continued, "I'm troubled by the timing and nature of this lawsuit. Filing a claim for emotional distress while simultaneously excluding the defendant from a wedding he fully funded suggests this action was brought in bad faith." She looked at Carol's lawyer. "I'm ordering the plaintiffs to pay Mr. Price's legal fees and am referring this matter to Adult Protective Services for review as potential financial elder abuse. Carol's face went white. Timothy started to stand, but his lawyer pulled him back down. The gavel came down. Court is adjourned. In the hallway afterward, Joyce shook my hand. "You did it, Leonard. We did it. I corrected." Through the courtroom doors, I could see Carol and Timothy arguing in hushed, angry voices. Their lawyer was packing his briefcase with sharp, frustrated movements. "Do you think she'll ever understand?" I asked Joyce. She looked at the arguing couple and shook her head. "Some people never do, but that's not your responsibility anymore." She was right. I walked out of that courthouse into the bright Portland afternoon. The air smelled like rain and fresh cut grass. Somewhere nearby, a food cart was selling coffee and pastries. Normal people doing normal things, completely unaware of the small war that had just ended inside. I bought a coffee and sat on a bench in the park across from the courthouse. I watched families walk by, fathers pushing strollers, daughters laughing with their dads, and I felt something unexpected. Peace, not happiness. Not yet, but peace. The kind that comes from finally standing up after years of being bent into shapes that weren't yours. Over the following months, my life changed in small, important ways. I sold the big house, the one full of memories and empty rooms, and moved to a smaller condo downtown with a view of the river. I joined a woodworking class at the community center. I started volunteering at the library, reading to kids on Tuesday afternoons. I traveled not extravagant trips, but real ones. I drove up the coast to Seattle, visited old Boeing colleagues, ate fresh salmon at Pike Place Market. I flew to Denver to see my college roommate I hadn't talked to in 15 years. We drank too much beer and laughed about being old. I lived. Not for Carol, not for anyone's expectations, but for myself. 6 months after the court hearing, I received a letter. Not legal documents this time, just a simple envelope with handwriting I recognized. "Dad, Timothy and I got married last month." It was small. Just immediate family at the courthouse. We decided not to do the big wedding after all. I'm writing because my therapist suggested I try to explain some things. I'm not asking for forgiveness or trying to get back into your life. I just want you to know that I'm starting to understand what happened. Timothy and I separated 2 weeks ago. Turns out he was only interested in me as long as the money was flowing. When it stopped, he found someone else whose father still had an open checkbook. I'm not telling you this to make you feel sorry for me. I'm telling you because I realize now that you were right about Timothy, about boundaries, about everything. I stole from you, not just money, but trust and respect and love. I treated you like you were only valuable for what you could provide. And when you finally had the courage to say no, I punished you for it. I don't expect you to forgive me. I'm not sure it'd forgive me. But I needed you to know that I see it now. What I did, what I lost. I'm sorry, Dad. Carol, I read the letter 3 times. Then I folded it carefully and put it in my desk drawer. I didn't respond. Maybe I would someday, maybe I wouldn't. But for now, I was okay with the silence. Because I'd learned something important in the last year. Love doesn't mean letting people destroy you. It doesn't mean funding their mistakes or enabling their worst behaviors. Sometimes love means saying no. Sometimes it means walking away. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, it means finding yourself again on the other side. That evening, I stood on my condo balcony, watching the sun set over the Willamette River. The sky burned orange and pink, reflecting off the water in colors Sharon would have loved. I thought about her sometimes, wondered what she'd think of all this. Part of me believed she'd be proud, not of the lawsuit or the pain, but of the man who finally learned to value himself. I raised my coffee cup to the sunset, to Sharon, to second chances. My name is Leonard Price. I'm 61 years old, and for the first time in years, my life belongs to me. Because the hardest lesson I learned at 61 wasn't about money or family betrayal. It was that setting boundaries isn't selfish, it's survival. And sometimes the greatest gift you can give someone isn't another check, but the chance to learn what happens when the checks stop coming. I discovered that love without limits isn't love at all, it's just fear dressed up as generosity. The day I stopped being an ATM with a heartbeat was the day I started being a father worth respecting. Turns out the best investment I ever made wasn't the $82,000 I gave away, it was the courage to stop giving it. I learned that enabling someone's worst behavior in the name of love isn't protecting them, it's destroying both of you $1 at a time. At 61, I finally understood what Sharon always knew. Real love teaches people to stand on their own, not lean on you until you break. The moment I chose my dignity over my daughter's demands was the moment I became the father she actually needed, not the one she wanted.